It's so good to be with you again. My name is Jeff Fuller. I'm the pastor at Living Hope Wesleyan Church. Most of you know that, but if you do not, then you can certainly subscribe to this YouTube channel, find our Sunday evening worship experiences, Sunday morning worship experiences, I should say, and all the other interviews that I've been able to have people join simply because we are beggars sharing bread with other beggars. And I feel if we can learn from someone's story, it's all the better to us. And someone that has a great story, good friend going way back, is Mr. Mike Macneil. Mike, great to have you on.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
So I have to say something in jest, maybe a little rude, but you are a little bit more gray than I recall when I was a student at Bethany Bible College.
Well,
Talk to me.
I'm
All the wisdom that represents. Talk to me about it.
well, I am. I just turned 62, so I'm definitely in the grayer years now.
Well, happy birthday, happy Father's Day. I just know that you've been at Kingswood for some time back when it was at Bethany Bible College. Can you just share? I tried to find the picture that you had posted of you with an afro. You were a young adult, but you did not come to faith as a child. Could you just talk us through your testimony, that journey?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't become a Christian until I was 24. So I was at the end of a master's program at kind of a secular, like the equivalent of a state university here in Canada. So yeah, I grew up just in a regular, what I considered a regular Canadian household. We didn't really. It wasn't that we were anti-church. We just kind of didn't go to church. It was just wasn't part of our lives, and so I didn't really. I did like all the stereotypical things, that you do as you're growing up, and I didn't really begin kind of being exposed to the church or Christian witness till I was into my early 20s.
Hmm. So when you think about these days, whatever that means now, do you
We
think
do live in interesting days for sure.
do you think students are being exposed to the gospel? How can the local church do a better job? Do you think it's any different than when you grew up?
Yeah, I think the church goes through different trends and different waves, and so I think that evangelism has and sharing your faith has been kind of on the down low, in the last several years, and it's coming back. So there's been more of an emphasis on social justice issues and compassion, and I teach both of those things. They're it's all part of the gospel, but I try to keep that in balance with an evangelistic message as well, because Jesus is ultimately the answer in the center of everything, and so he has to the simple gospel about Jesus has to stay at the center of our lives.
And here's a link to the website. The Praxis is the program that you spur on, that you lead. And again, during this time, more than COVID, the riots, the protests, it is kind of nutty. And everybody says, well, we're closer to the end times. And I think every day we're closer to the end time. So it's not that far of a stretch. But how do we share that we love people and also proclaim the gospel at the same time?
Yeah, there's always that. I mean, um, Jesus was the truth, and he's also the embodiment of love. Like the gospel is always incarnational, and so what I have found with people is that there's that balance between grace and truth. Jesus was full of grace and truth, and what we tend to do as Christians is, however our personality type is, we just gravitate to one or the other. And all the truth tellers just run around like throwing little truth bombs, and not loving people enough. And then there's another group of Christians who just want to love everybody and never get into any kind of an awkward discussion or something that might make them feel uncomfortable. So what I've found is if you really if you are involved in people's lives, if you're relational and they know that you really care about them, you can have really honest conversations with them and it won't offend them. If that's not the case, if you just come at them with truth and they're not convinced that you really have their best interests at heart, like almost anything you say will offend them. And so you kind of earn, your relationship gives you like a platform to speak into people's lives. And the more of a relationship we have with somebody, the more we can just have honest gut level conversation about what's true and what isn't true, and maybe some of the things we might disagree about.
Well, I certainly agree with that. And I understand that there's an expression that it's hard to be enemies with your friends. Sean Lovejoy, he just made a comment that good leaders invite criticism from their friends to question their leadership because he thinks it will spur us on to be better. Something for you, I just remember when I was, 18 years old, freshman at college. You actually, I feel, did a great balance of being a professor, but also welcoming in the new students from the different backgrounds. A lot of us were from the United States. Bethany's up, or Kingswood is in New Brunswick, Canada. Did you have to learn those people skills, or do you think you were born with just loving people and leaning maybe towards that gracer side versus the truther?
I think I'm naturally wired to be on the more on the truth side of things, and so I've kind of learned. I've been taught by the Holy Spirit how to temper that and how to kind of balance that, and so and I think it, as far as college students go, I always say let your arrested development work for you, and I've just always gotten along with the age group of college students, and so it's fairly easy for me to be able to relate to people that are like 18 to 30 or whatever. That's not much of a stretch for me.
And when I was a youth pastor in Johnson, we took a trip with you to New York City, and there's just something about serving side by side, and it is presenting the gospel, but it's also making disciples of those presenting the gospel. Can you just talk about the importance of people serving on a short-term trip? And I know this summer might not be the time you schedule a trip, but what have you seen just change in people when they actually look the gospel in the face and they actually get to see their hands and feet doing what Jesus did?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, I basically, with the Praxis program, sometimes people ask me like, how did you come up with the idea for that? And I'm just like, I've stolen all my best ideas from Jesus. Like, it's just the way I do things is just pattern on, what I see in the Bible, where Jesus took a group of people and he was obviously teaching them, but he was teaching along the way. They were doing things. They were kind of learning by doing. And there's something about that goes very deep. So it can be very life-changing and transformational. It's one thing to talk about something in a classroom, but if you immediately go out and apply it, and then you go back into the classroom and say, how is that different from what you thought it was going to be? What was surprising? What new thing did you learn? If you process it that way, it can go a lot deeper, and the learning can be more permanent than if you just learn it in theory and there's this big time gap between what you learn and applying it. So that's kind of basically what I've done with the Praxis program here at Kingswood. And also when I do mission trips in the summer, it's kind of based on that model. Everything that I had planned for the summer got canceled. Most of my ministry involves traveling and being in larger groups of people. And those are the two things that you're not supposed to be doing right now.
So, I mean, I met you or knew you as a professor, but also you traveled around and spoke a lot in the summer, different camps and retreats and things of that nature. How are you navigating this summer where you're going to be either stuck at home or doing things quite differently? Like, being on, is it a stress to you? How do you work through, okay, God, I trust you, but this is completely different. I have to live by faith now.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. It's been a stretch for me because I'm very action oriented, and I've been. I mean, this is. I was trying to figure it out the other day. I think the last time I was home for a summer, I'm pretty sure it was like 1988, and so every summer I travel to do ministry and speak and do all kinds of stuff. So I've been. I've it kind of ebbs and flows. Like I'll be okay for a while, and then I'll get really antsy, and I'll have to like go off and do some extreme hike or something like that to keep myself challenged and busy. So I'm definitely kind of learning in this time and trying not to be too impatient with things.
Well, jumping in the cold streams of Canada will wake you up and kind of bring refreshment. And I saw that post the other day; it made me laugh. With camps, I mean, there's people that are very much advocates for summer camps. There's also those that say that they lasted their time and now it's time for a different form of ministry. I just know when I attend a camp, there's nothing like it. But when I'm not there, I'm making excuses why camp is something of the past, especially with youth camps. Can you just talk about how the church can replicate that camp experience this summer in a different fashion, or is it just being set apart in the woods with a tin roof, rain coming down, and just the Holy Spirit moving?
Well, yeah, I think there's two secrets to camp. Why camp. When my kids were growing up, I said there were two things that, out of all the exposure in the church to different things, the two things that made the difference in my kids' life were going to camp and going on missions trips. Like if I had to keep two things and eliminate everything else, those would be the two most impactful things. And I think it's because like you shut out the world, you shut out the other voices, you have one very clear purpose at each place, and you're just setting aside a period of time to experience God and listen to what God has for you. And so I think those are the two keys to both of those experiences. And I don't really know how you can kind of replicate that online. So it's a tough one. I know there are some places around where I'm at. They're allowing like some overnight camps now, and so Christian camps are doing shorter and definitely a lot more rules, but they're trying to kind of press on with the camp experience.
Now, the graduation for Kingswood was certainly different, like everywhere. Can you just talk about this class? Well, not specifically 2020, but this group, this era of students, do they come in more idealistic? Do you think it's relative? What do you think is the hope for, whether it's the Wesleyan denomination, students graduating from Wesleyan institutions, or Christian ministry students around going into this pandemic as they start their career?
Yeah, it was a really basically, I was on spring break. There were 20 of us, and we were way up in the Andes in Peru, and so we literally, kind of came down from the mountains, got on a plane, flew back to Kingswood, and that week we all just suddenly left and went home.
Wow.
And so it's been a very strange kind of experience. It was like I had some students that were graduating this year that I get very close to, and it was just like, I think everybody struggled with that sense of suddenness and lack of closure, and so we just kind of did our best in the midst of that to do what we could, and I think as far as students go, I think there's always different issues, like when you were a student, Jeff, it was more of the age of like the students who they were very idealistic and wanted to kind of charge hell with a water pistol, and just get out there. And I think that the current group of students are they're more maybe a little more on the realistic side than the idealistic side, and they've like thought through some of that a bit more, and there's strengths and weaknesses to both. When you guys were at school, I think I would have to speak a little bit of wisdom and calm down the zealousness a bit, whereas now I feel like I have to. They are a little more cautious, and so I have to put press a little bit more on the gas and the passion part of it with them rather than the brake.
So I love this picture behind me because, as I remember, this describes you, danger restricted area. And I think of, Larry Mitchell, Andrew Wigston, Dan Lamus, yourself. You guys had a huge impact on my life, and we've all taken our different journeys and experienced different things. When you look back to being idealistic and then understanding, well, life is not fair. It's not just preaching about Jesus, but it's learning to navigate working with people and presenting that message in a special way, particular way, depending on the environment. How do you still say, I'm following Jesus with full abandon, but I still have to have enough self-awareness or restraint so I don't leave people in my wake?
Yeah, that's I tend to be naturally pretty adventurous and pretty passionate. And I would not say I'm a rule follower. I would say as soon as I hear a rule, I try to figure out like how can I stay within the rule, but get as close to it as possible, and so so for me it's as we get older, we get more conservative, and we get I think the great danger is for you to settle and for your passion to kind of die down and to become basically like overly realistic. And so I have consciously tried to fight against that, and I try to keep there's a lot of things that I do where I've done it a million times before, and I'm doing it with a group of students, but it's not a new experience for me. But I try to keep something like every year I try to put something into my schedule that is brand new for me, that keeps me challenged, that where I can kind of check myself and make sure I'm not just kind of like settling into some kind of nursing home version of Christianity. So,
do you think that's because you were saved at a later point in life where you know the importance of it, where sometimes those that have grown up in the church, we take it for granted?
Yeah, I think I think I got all of my kind of a lot of my mistakes out of the way pretty early, and kind of so for me to rebel was to accept Jesus. Like for me to go against the grain was to become a Christian and accept Jesus. And so as a first generation Christian, that there's a lot of things about that are kind of advantageous. Like I had a very direct personal experience with Jesus that I've honestly never doubted it. Like it happened 30 some years ago, but it was a benchmark in my life, and I know it was real. And so that's the foundation for my faith. And so I don't tend to struggle with a lot of doubts about that. Whereas if you grow up in the church and your conversion is more kind of gradual, you struggle kind of with different issues than if you're a first generation Christian.
See, and that's also why I love your testimony, because it gives me, and I think it should all Christians, great hope for the current environment which we're living. Because so many times we hear the negative about Jesus isn't in the school, kids are growing up without God, but I think what an opportunity we have. Jesus kicks and other stories I can't tell in church. Hey, so I remember you wrote a book that we used for personal evangelism my freshman year. What is it about writing that you enjoy, or do you not enjoy it, but this is just something you had to do?
Well, I kind of started out as a writer, and then I got into speaking. And so I had this long, I wrote a couple of things, and then I had this long stretch before I put it out anything, because basically I just got uh, speaking has like an immediate gratification to it. The audience is right there, and so whereas if writing, you write something and then a year later you get feedback on it, and but I did take the time to sit down and kind of write some stuff, and I've got another book that I'm actually working on since I have a lot of time on my hands right now. It's kind of a follow up to that one, and so the great thing about writing is that it goes like I can preach to people without actually being there.
Yeah.
Like once you put a book out, people buy it, they give it to other people. You never know where it's going to show up. Like I was at a funeral, and this lady walked up to me in a really hushed voice, and she pulled a copy of the book like out of the top of her purse, and whispered like, "I'm really enjoying your book." and so I had no idea like where she got it. I wasn't really like, I didn't even know who she was, and so so your book, you never know. It ends up in different countries. It ends up in different people's hands, and you get to have an impact on people without even being there.
Yeah. That's awesome. You guys can find this book on Kindle, and just go to Amazon app, search Kindle, and Jesus Kicks is right there by Mike Macneil. Hey, I really like this art. Did you dabble in art previously and we just didn't know about it? Is this just a new venture that you wanted to do?
Well, I was really into art when I was in like high school, and I actually applied to an art college and was accepted, and was kind of all set to go. And then life got complicated because I had to choose between Colleen, who's now my wife, but I had to choose between the girl and art school, and so I chose the girl, and ended up going and taking some writing and literature stuff instead at a university. But so I just kind of got busy with other stuff and haven't really done art in years. And then with the virus and the lockdown and everything, I was like, I've got to find something creative to keep myself busy. And it was Easter time, and Colleen was like, why don't you put can you put a portrait of Jesus on like our living room window? Can you do a big portrait of Jesus for Easter? And so I just did this thing, this picture of Jesus I found on the internet, and had the word hope underneath it, just to kind of encourage the neighborhood. Yeah. And then I was like, well, that was kind of fun. Maybe I'll try some other stuff. And so the basement of my house has now been turned into a little art studio. And whenever I get bored, I go down and try another painting.
That's awesome. And not to over spiritualize it, which pastors are known to do, but Psalm 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. So I think his timing, you got the girl, and now you get to do the art. So
hey, it all comes around if you wait long enough, right? It all comes back around.
I guess so. Now, your family, it's been fun for me to watch from a distance, because your kids were little when I was a student, and now you get to see everybody grow up. But the question I have for you is, my son just graduated from high school on Saturday. My daughter is going into her junior year of high school this coming fall. Talk to me about the joy you feel watching them grow up, but also the apprehension of knowing that you can't control them anymore.
Yeah, so I have 4 kids. I have 4 daughters, and I now have like 7 grandchildren. And my daughters are all over the world. I have one in South Korea, one in Haiti, one in California, and one in Washington State. And so yeah, it's been. I don't have the parent story where like, oh, it was so hard and so awful, and like, I don't know. I just had like great kids, and Colleen was a great mom, and so it's been really cool to watch my kids grow up, and all of them are involved in ministry, and some very directly and some more indirectly, but we always had it in our mind, like we're not really going to try to control what they do for an occupation. We're not going to get bogged down in all that other stuff. Like, all we really care about is as like, do they love Jesus, and are they going to serve God with their lives? And we just kind of made that the center of everything, and like, everything else is up to you. And I had a very loose parenting style, and so it's kind of like, I let my kids do things that would probably get me in trouble nowadays, but we gave them direction, but we also gave them a lot of freedom to be themselves, and I think that was important. And so my kind of deal was like, hey, I've taught you everything I know, and now it's time to spread your wings and get out there and do it. And we trust you, so just go for it.
Well, that's to focus on the important things. I think there's a great example that you've set for others. And before I get you out, just share a little bit. Kingswood University, what are the plans for this fall, and the opportunity of students to be a part of Praxis? Could you just talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, praxis literally means like faith in action. Orthodoxy is right belief, which is very important. Orthopraxy is just right lifestyle or right action. And so praxis is a highly experiential. It's a mix of the classroom and getting out and doing all kinds of outreach kind of ministry. And so the plans for the fall. Obviously, it's really hard to project. Even now that we're into June, it's to know what September, October is going to look like. It's very hard. The plan for the school right now is that we are open for students to come back to classes, and we're hoping that the majority of students come back. We also realize that there are going to be some people that might not be able to do that, and so live classes are set for the fall, and it'll be kind of business as usual that day with, following some of the government guidelines that are in place. But classes are also available online. If somebody needs to stay home, they can continue their education that way. And hopefully as we move along, we'll kind of come out of this period back into some sense of normalcy.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Mike, the last question I'll have for you. Thanks so much. It's great catching up.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Several years ago, as a youth pastor, you spoke at a youth rally that we did at a local church. And it was interesting because the music was fun and loud and crazy, but it didn't seem as though the kids were into it. The congregation wasn't really getting involved. But then you got up and spoke, and we joke that it took Mike Macneil to save the day. But what can you say about speaking, but just really listening to the Holy Spirit? Because we've seen dynamic speakers, we've heard phenomenal presentations, but how much do you really, and I know the good Christian answer, so fight that, but how difficult is it not just to preach the same sermon works and really depend on the Holy Spirit? And I'm really trying to figure this out, just being online for Sunday sermons as well, that if Jesus can come through a camera, but your best intentions without God just fall way short. But what advice would you give? What have you learned about speaking and just depending so much on God's Spirit?
Yeah, when I was like first starting out, when I was younger, there would be moments when I would feel like I was supposed to take my nice prepared message and set it aside, which is a really scary thing to do, right? Speak extemporaneously. And, there were a couple times when I was like, I played it safe and I was like, no, this is a really good message. I'm just going to do it anyway. And it was like, technically it might've been better, but then it has absolutely no impact. And the times when I followed the Spirit instead and just kind of obeyed, even though it might have been somewhat scattered in my mind, it always had more of an impact. And so I just kind of learned from that, like, it's really not so much about perfect wording or a certain level of passion or a style. It's, spiritual things happen by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And so you really, sometimes when I've felt like I've preached the worst message, it's had the most impact. And then there's been other times when I was thinking, man, this is going really well. This is awesome. It's like it just falls flat, and like nothing happens. And so you really can't judge by like all the external things. You have to just keep reminding yourself, this isn't about me. This is like God does his work, and he just uses us as a tool to do it. And so yeah, I'm a big proponent of being spirit led for sure.
So to press into that just a little bit more, like what habits have you had to develop? I had a friend that said there's a strong correlation with how much time you spend in the word and how much you can hear a spirit when you are presenting or preaching. And I know I felt at times, hey, I really followed God's leading, and somebody said, no, you just shot from the hip. That was off the cuff. You were not prepared.
Right.
And that just really said, oh, yeah, you're right. I thought, but I was just being lazy. What habits have you had to develop so you can really know that, man, I'm just following God, even though it's makes me nervous? I just know it's his leading.
Yeah. And, I guess, the tree is known by its fruit, I guess. Like it, there's a lot of things about faith where you don't really know it except when you look back in retrospect. And it's always, no matter how many times you do it, it always feels like you're taking a risk. And so what I found, like as I've gotten older, I've kind of relaxed in the same way in marriage, you kind of relax with each other.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, so rigid and intentional. And like, what are the 5 secrets to having a good marriage, or the 5 secrets of growing close to God? You just kind of relax and you learn. Everybody relates to God through different things. And so, some people are really into like, I've got to have all kinds of time alone and be really meditative. And other people are, I really experience God when I worship. You just have to, like, when you're close to God and when you're not. And you just need to figure that out for yourself. And it's an individual kind of thing. So I tend to feel closer to God when I'm in action and serving him. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not as reflective as some people would like. And I don't tend to have really like super long blocked out times of prayer or anything. But I've just learned, like, that's okay. Like, everybody has their own personal relationship with God, and you just figure out what that looks like for you.
I think that's great. That was gold, people. And though we don't have many viewers, my daughter always says, Dad, you only have 3 viewers. And I say, you know what? It's not for those viewing live. It's like writing. It's for those that will listen or watch after. But that was gold. I mean, so much you said today just really spoke to me. And I think it brings great assurance that we do have good days ahead because we follow Jesus, and the urgency to share the gospel and serve others really communicates and speaks to the heart of people. And so, Mike, thanks again for making the time from the Maritimes to join us here in Vermont. So you're the best. Thank you.
It was great talking with you, and hopefully we can see each other face to face sometime soon.
Let's do it. We'll make it happen somehow. So, all right, Mike. Hey, take care.
Right. See you later, Jeff.
And again, that's Mike Macneil. Kingswood.edu is where you can find information about the practice program. And I certainly encourage you to do so. And if you just want to go to college for a year, you aren't certain what you want to study, check out Praxis. Tremendous program. And Mike is just one of the best. All right. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Thanks so much.